Oh my
I'm
god!
buying this day one.
Oh my god!
Day one, Chris.
This
We're
is
doing a live stream of
amazing!
this.
Whoa!
What?
No way! No way!
No!
No way, bro! Yo! Yo!
Little Big Planet means a lot to me. It's one of the gaming franchises I've always loved the most since I was a kid, and it's one of the major reasons I decided pretty early on in my life that I wanted to create video games for a living. And I'm far from the only one who was impacted by the series in that way. The first two games were both immensely popular when they first came out. Millions of people created and shared levels online, and some of the best of those creators went on to work on the actual series itself, which is ridiculously cool. LBP was everywhere during the PS3 era, and rightfully so. In a time when graphical upgrades led to dozens of grounded, gritty games, LBP was such a great breath of fresh air for PlayStation players. Developer Media Molecule provided not only great platforming story modes for everyone to enjoy, but also provided a toolset for inspired creators to make their own levels that, with enough work, could be just as advanced as those in the campaign. Coupled with the fact that people sharing their levels online led to an almost infinite amount of content, and LBP gave players a ridiculous amount of bang for their buck. The popularity of the series turned Sackboy, the game's main character, into a sort of makeshift mascot for PlayStation at the time, with multiple side games, a kart racer, and boatloads of crossover DLC. However, this abundance of LBP content slowed down to a crawl once the PS3 era ended. Media Molecule had decided they wanted to move on from the franchise, so development was handed over to Sumo Digital for Little Big Planet 3. And while I love that game to pieces, and I think it has some of the best levels and mechanics in the entire franchise, it's no secret that reception was somewhat more mixed compared to its predecessors, mostly due to a lack of technical polish. And though the level creator was more robust than ever before, I think it was clear that by LBP3 the formula was starting to become a bit stale. We'd had 5 2D platformers in this series up to this point, and though each major title introduced loads of great new mechanics, it's hard to imagine how the franchise would have progressed in a meaningful way if it had stayed on the same path it was on before. So when faced with developing a new game, Sumo had a choice. They could either make the same game again with some new features, call it Little Big Planet 4, release it on PS5 and just hope fans would return for more, or they could make tough design decisions, scrapping major elements of the previous games and focusing on others to make something completely new, taking a chance to reignite the franchise over a decade into its life. Sumo chose to do the latter, and the result was Sackboy: A Big Adventure, one of the best platform games I've ever played. Yes, you heard me right. I'm even a little bit surprised to be saying it myself. But this game completely blew me away, and I'm fully confident saying it's one of the best 3D platformers out there. You can tell from start to end just how much time, effort, love, and care went into every aspect of this game. The visuals, the animation, the level design, the music, the voice acting, everything. It maintains the core DNA of Little Big Planet, but takes several gigantic steps to move the series in a totally new direction that's just so inspired and fun. And it does all of this without multiple major series staples, most notably creating and sharing levels online. And I think if we're gonna do a full review of this thing, that's as good a place to start as any. Now, it's no secret that I was ridiculously excited for this game. Given that I'm a huge Little Big Planet fanboy and it's been 6 years since the last game, I was bound to jump out of my seat at anything LBP related. But, for as much of a fanboy as I am, I said from my very first reaction to this game,
I mean, if it's called Sackboy: A Big Adventure, I would hope they would bring back creative mode, because it's not Little Big Planet if there's no create mode, but
creating has been integral to the series since its inception, and I, like many others, was pretty bummed when Ned Waterhouse came out and confirmed that yes, this entry would be focused entirely on playing rather than creating. However, even though I still thought the game looked great regardless, it took me actually playing through it to realize that ditching create mode, despite how backwards it may seem, was exactly what this series needed to evolve. Making the jump to 3D, though it was obviously the direction the series was heading in, would have made creating far more complex and inaccessible to newcomers, regardless of how simple the tools would have been. This was already apparent with Little Big Planet karting, where, despite having a very similar interface to the previous games, it was much harder to create something visually appealing or impressive without sinking hours and hours into learning the ins and outs. I have no doubt that this was one of the first conversations Sumo's devs had when planning this game. And though getting rid of something so essential to LBP couldn't have been an easy call, it's clear the more you think about it that it's one they needed to make. Hell, Medium Molecule had pretty much the exact same revelation in reverse after Little Big Planet 2. They were more interested in fleshing out the user creation experience rather than moving Sackboy himself further, so they spent years developing Dreams, a 3D creation suite for PlayStation that they themselves have described as the ultimate evolution of Little Big Planet's create tools. But Sumo knew there was so much more potential to take advantage of within the world of Craft World, and including creation tools would have forced them to dumb down their story experience to make sure players would be able to create things on par with it. So, they removed Create Mode and focused solely on making their story mode the best it could possibly be. And after playing through it multiple times, I can say with confidence that it was 100% worth it. There's just so much character and charm oozing out of every corner of this game. All of the levels are beautiful and lively, and the characters within those levels are more expressive than they've ever been. The kind of detail and complexity this game achieves in its visuals, character animation, and level design just wouldn't be possible if the devs would have had to make sure it could be done by any and all players. And I have no issue saying that as a result, the adventure here is the best in the entire series. The story modes of the other games are extremely nostalgic for me, and they're all still great fun in their own way. But this game's adventure is just on an entirely different level. Okay, I think I've spent enough time now justifying Sumo's approach to the game, so now that we've got that out of the way, let's get into what really makes this game so great. Which is pretty much everything. First off, the gameplay. Sackboy himself feels better to control here than he ever has before. Sumo realized the floaty, physics-based platforming of the previous games just wouldn't cut it in 3D. So not only did they alter Sackboy's weight and jump height, they also gave him tons of new moves, like rolling, ground pounding, and spinning, which, while not always necessary, especially not spinning, provide many great new options for both traversal and combat. I was initially a bit disappointed by Sackboy's top speed, but the levels are built around it, so even though there were a few times I wished I could go a bit faster, it didn't bother me for the most part. In addition to the standard platforming, there are several great mechanics thrown into the mix to keep things fresh. Some brand new, some returning from previous games, and all of them tons of fun, especially the grapple hook. Oh my god, that power-up is the best. The main collectibles needed to progress are Dreamer Orbs, and while not all of them are especially hard to find, they definitely require you to keep an eye out and explore your surroundings. Also, this might sound a bit weird, and it's not a bad thing at all, but the way the Dreamer Orbs are implemented made me realize this game takes a lot of design cues from Rayman Origins and Legends, especially with the secret side areas, the ×2 score bubbles, and the way it counts up your score at the end of the level. And honestly, I think it's kind of poetic that one of my new favorite 3D platformers of all time takes clear inspiration from some of my favorite 2D platformers of all time. In addition to the game being tons of fun to play, the worlds you visit are all fantastic and so exciting to explore. There are 5 main worlds, and each of them has a surprisingly large amount of levels to complete, especially when compared to Little Big Planet 3. And though these levels are all part of an overarching theme, they all feel distinct from one another and have their own great challenges and visual identity. The themes themselves are all great too, and I especially appreciate that the water world doesn't involve swimming or slow water movement at all, just normal platforming levels that take place under the ocean. Sumo finally cracked the code on how to make a good water level. No water. Genius. But, and here's another genius thing about this game, if you're feeling a bit sick of one world, you can always pop over to another world and play some levels from it early. Along the world map, you can find these flower guys that launch you to another world, and unlike Mario where the cannons basically let you skip giant chunks of the game, these shortcuts only give you access to a couple levels, giving you a short little taste test of the worlds yet to come, while also giving you a little break from the world you're currently playing through. This is honestly such a fantastic idea that I don't understand why I haven't seen it done in more platformers before. Mario Odyssey kind of does this, but it's not really the same thing, and doesn't really amount to much more than a couple bonus moons, and I don't know how many paintings actually let you go to worlds you haven't been to yet. Doesn't matter. Point is, the gameplay and level design in Sackboy is top-notch. Also, I didn't mention the knitted night trials, but I don't have much to say about them other than that if you love side challenges that test your platforming skills like I do, you're gonna like these. Until you get to the last one, which is literally every single previous challenge combined into one. Oh yeah, and you have to beat the whole thing in one go without dying or you have to start all over again. Of course, you've probably been able to take notice of this yourself by now, but this game looks absolutely incredible. It carries on the handcrafted feel of the LBP franchise and takes it further than ever before. The amazing textures and loads of great little details make this world feel handcrafted without taking you out of the experience or making the world seem fake. The game also has some spectacular sound design too, and when you combine the great visual and audio feedback you get from killing a monster or collecting something, you end up with one of the most satisfying platforming experiences I've ever played through. And to top it all off, even though this game is a PS5 launch title, it still looks and runs pretty good on PS4 too, aside from some occasional choppiness in the cutscenes. As for the story, though it isn't anything especially deep, I found it to be the most engaging one we've had since LBP Vita. All the characters are animated so expressively, and the voice performances are great, especially Richard E. Grant as Vex. Seriously, Vex is by far the best villain in any Little Big Planet game, bar none. The Collector was barely even there, the Negativatron was just a monster that ate everything, and Newton was fun, but we knew from the beginning he wasn't really a bad guy, just a dim-witted guy possessed by some generic evil force. Vex, despite having generic motivations, is performed and animated with so much energy and obviously has so much fun doing what he does that you can't help but enjoy him when he's on screen. He also shows up to directly taunt and fight Sackboy much more than any other villain, to the point where I almost see him as this universe's Gruntilda, especially towards the end of the game when he's constantly messing with you as you get closer to him. Another favorite character of mine was Naomi, a really cool AI character that shows up later in the game. She's friendly when you first meet her, but she has occasional outbursts of violent comments mixed in with her normal speech. They seem at first like funny little glitches, but throughout the course of the world, these outbursts slowly increase, and you soon realize that Vex is actively trying to hack her mind and turn her against you. This all culminates not only with a fantastic boss fight, which there are many of in this game, but also a level backed up by Toxic. Yes, Britney Spears is toxic, that directly correlates to the struggle Naomi is having of keeping Vex at bay. Oh my god, okay, can we talk about the music for a second? Because this game has one of my new favorite game soundtracks of all time. All of the original music is fantastic, and is very reminiscent of the original attitude and wonder that games like LBP 1 and 2 had with their soundtracks. But then there's the licensed music, and this game really popped off with it. LBP has always had licensed music, but it's usually been fairly niche stuff, not stuff you'd hear on the radio or usually have in your Spotify playlists. And while there's still tons of great lesser-known licensed music in here, there are several instantly recognizable tunes that always had me laughing out loud to myself in disbelief. I almost recommend you skip this part of the video because being surprised by some of the song choices was one of my favorite parts of this game. But assuming you don't care about that, I'm talking Bruno Mars, Foster the People, David Bowie, and many more! I never expected mega hits like these to show up in an LBP game, but they were such fun surprises every time, and honestly fit into this game surprisingly well. A handful of the major unaltered licensed songs have levels dedicated to them that play out to the beat, another thing that seems to be inspired by Rayman. But there are also several wonderful cases where a licensed song is mixed into the background of what sounds at first like an original composition, and you can really only tell if you listen super closely sometimes. When the credits rolled, some songs I knew went by that I didn't even remember hearing during the game, and I'm sure they were mixed in somewhere and I didn't even notice, which is another really fun layer to the game and is almost worth a replay on its own. I definitely couldn't get away with playing any of this game's unaltered licensed music for you, but I think I can afford to play you some snippets of the remixes and original songs, for the sake of showcasing how excellent the soundtrack is. Alright, negatives. It's time for negatives. It's not a fair review without negatives. No game is perfect, after all. And I know I already did the whole bit in my DeBlob video about how the game was perfect other than some nagging issues, and to be honest, I was kind of willing to downplay some of that game's fairly noticeable flaws because of nostalgia and the fact that I wanted more people to give the game a shot. Here, though, I legitimately have no major complaints, just a few little minor things to get out of the way. First, there's no way to change your costume in the middle of a level anymore, and this makes complete sense because not only did Sumo use almost every button for something in this game, but someone stopping to change their costume and taking forever in multiplayer was a complete pace breaker in the past. But now the only way to change it is to go to Zoom Zoom's Fashion Emporium. And I gotta be honest guys, I don't like Zoom Zoom that much. The system of buying new outfits with collectibles is good, and is much better integrated into this game than it was in LBP3. But the entire time you're in the tent, Zoom Zoom constantly makes comments about wanting you to buy something or some other random thing about fashion. I wouldn't care if he just greeted you when you entered and left, but he just won't stop talking. And if you're like me, you're gonna spend a lot of time browsing and putting together costumes in this menu, and Zoom Zoom's commentary gets old really, really fast. He doesn't even have that many phrases either, and quickly ends up repeating the same stuff, so I often ended up just muting the game whenever I went to change my costume. This could have easily been less of an issue by just lowering the frequency of Zoom Zoom's comments, or just letting you change your costume from the map screen. You can choose different saved costumes before you jump into a level, but you can only create new ones in Zoom Zoom's tent. Obviously, this is a very minor thing that doesn't play into the core gameplay at all, and I'm sure there are people out there that like Zoom Zoom, but that's just something that bothered me personally. Other than that, just a couple other minor things. I was originally going to complain about the relatively short amount of costumes here, but after playing the game even more extensively and unlocking more costumes, I realized that was a dumb complaint, so I cut it. Especially since costumes and DLC carried across all three of the original games and the spin-offs, it doesn't really seem fair to compare those to this game when talking about costumes. Besides, there are still plenty of great costumes here, and dressing up is still just as much fun as it ever was, especially when you get to see your costumes in the beautifully animated cutscenes. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to be complaining right now, aren't I? In terms of actual gameplay, there were a couple sections when I had to grab onto a sponge, and when I tried to grab it, sometimes I would just bounce off and die, even though I didn't do anything differently. A bit weird. Combat isn't especially challenging or engaging, but I don't really think it needs to be, and fighting enemies becomes much more satisfying when you've got a power-up like the spinny frisbee thingy. Also, I recommend turning infinite lives on. The pop-up says playing with lives is Sumo's intended experience, and the game is very generous with lives, so you probably won't lose them all anyway. But they don't really add anything to the game, and they just make you replay the level if you lose them all. I kind of feel like the only reason they say you should play with them on is because of a mechanic in one of the boss fights, which I won't spoil here. But the fact that infinite lives is an option in the first place basically makes this a non-issue, so why am I even talking about it? Let's see, anything else? I don't know, this is pretty low-hanging fruit, don't you think? Alright, now that we've got those out of the way, let's quickly go back to praising the game and talk about some of the other little touches I loved about it to wash away all that dang negativity. Sackboy has tiny little voice clips now. He doesn't actually talk, thank God, but the sounds make him even more adorable and remind me of the way Mario's voice clips in Mario 64 added so much to his character at the time. The prize bubble sound comes out of the controller speaker now, and it's really satisfying. Actually, collecting literally every collectible in the game is really satisfying, especially the Dreamer Orbs. Which reminds me, I love Sackboy's new theme, and I love the variations of it that play every time you get a new Dreamer Orb. The sticker book is a really cool way to incorporate stickers as a collectible without repeating their functionality from the previous game. Co-op is a ton of fun, and I love that they turn the mini co-op challenges into actual full-on co-op levels, encouraging people to play together for longer stretches of time. I originally played this game on PS4, but the PS5 version has a fair amount of additional touches that make the game feel even better to play. These include added tension in the triggers when you grab stuff, minor graphical upgrades, and haptic feedback in the controller that makes picking up collectibles so much more satisfying than something like Mario 3D World. I didn't even try this until after I'd beaten this game twice, but you can collect paints and prize bubbles and use them to change the color of pretty much every costume piece in the game. I don't know why I didn't use this before, but it adds so many possibilities to the costume creation system. I made a cute little Cloud Strife with the paints, and I already know I'm going to go back and make dozens more costumes. Oh my god, I love this game so much. And finally, I won't spoil them here, but the final unlockable levels are amazing, especially the very last level. And I love that you don't need every single Dreamer Orb in the game to access them. Looking at you, Mario. Whew, okay. I think that's enough. So yeah, If you couldn't tell, I love Sackboy Big Adventure. And if you like platformers, I can't imagine a world in which you wouldn't like it too. This game is practically everything I love about video games rolled up into one fantastic package. A complete blast from start to end. A game that not only reminded me why I fell in love with Little Big Planet in the first place, but also made me so unbelievably excited for the franchise's future. And dear God, I hope there is a future. I don't think LBP has been as popular for the last few games as it was when those first two came out, and Sackboy seems to be being overshadowed by other big-budget PS5 launch games like Demon's Souls and Spider-Man. And Bugsnax. But if LBP 3 showed me that Sumo could replicate Media Molecule's formula for success, Sackboy showed me that they had the ingenuity and imagination necessary to take this franchise to greater heights than it's ever reached before. So if this game looks even remotely appealing to you, I cannot recommend it enough. And I hope to the good Sony overlords that this game sells well, so we can welcome Sackboy back into the fold of PlayStation staples with open arms. God knows I already want to give him a giant hug.